What's up, gearheads? It's Trev, and today at the garage we're doing coilovers. Again. So the Yanaka coilovers sucked. I'm slammed in the front, I'm all the way jacked up in the rear to the point where it's actually unsafe to drive. You guys have probably seen the review video on the Yanakas by now, so they're coming out. And seeing as last time it was split up into a couple of different videos, I figured this is a good opportunity to make a how-to. So if you're trying to figure out how to change your coilovers, here's the basics. First and foremost, do your research. Buy something that is well known and good. Don't just try to cheap out and get whatever somebody says fits, because as you can see, I learned the hard way. How-to Mighty Car Mod style. We're gonna need to get the wheels off, so first we've got to jack up the car. Terrible at an Australian accent, I'm sorry. So now with your car in the air and the wheels off, we're going to assess under the hood. Now under the front, for most Hondas, you've got two nuts on the top of each coilover at your strut towers. From the back is a different story. Some of you guys are going to have to remove a lot of your interior, whereas some of you will just have access points to get to the shock towers. I can get to mine through these access panels here, but I cannot get on the bolts. In my car though, if I take the speaker covers out and take the back speakers out, I can get directly straight down to the shock towers. Now I've got access to my shock towers. Pull this little rubber cap off. There's the top of the coilovers. Two more nuts. Now I find it easiest to just get everything apart in the back, hood open in the front, get all my tools ready. The last thing I'm gonna do is take out the top nuts on all four of the coilovers. So now, once I get my tools put together, I'm gonna get down low, we're gonna disconnect everything from the bottom, then we can unbolt them from the top, slide them right out. We'll start with removing the rear coilover. It's just attached with a fork at the bottom and one bolt. Now we can remove the top. Now we undo the two nuts holding the top of the coilover. And once you get to the second one, reach in there and support it. And out she comes. Careful not to lose your hardware. Now the front can be a little trickier. You've still got the two nuts on the top, the same trick as the back, but you will probably need to remove your upper control arm, get enough clearance to get this out. You can disconnect the coilover from this bolt right here on the fork, or you can disconnect the fork from the lower control arm. If you do decide to disconnect it from up here, you'll need to put downward pressure with a pry bar on the lower control arm and make sure that you keep your skin clear. Because I have pinched myself doing that, and yes, it hurts a lot. To disconnect your upper control arm, you've got a 17mm castle nut that you need to take off the upper ball joint. Take your cotter pin out first. I've already removed mine. Then remove the nut. Careful not to lose your hardware, you're going to reuse it. Then, if you've got a really stubborn upper control arm, or if you're not planning on reusing this ball joint, you can wedge a pickle fork in there and hit it with a hammer. but most of the time, a couple of good whacks right to the steering knuckle with a hammer will get this thing loose. If you plan on reusing this ball joint, never ever hit the threaded part. And now, just by disconnecting that, we've got room to remove our coil over. Next step is to get a wrench on this 17mm nut down here, and on the opposite side, we've got another 17mm bolt to remove. Now we're broken free of the lower control arm, and we can remove our top nuts to drop this whole assembly out. Now if you're taking this apart by removing that lower fork, you're gonna have to take some more stuff apart. I like taking apart as little as possible. As you can see, I don't quite have enough room to lift this thing out of here. So if you're doing this method, you're gonna have to remove your brakes, disconnect your tie rod end, and remove the steering knuckle. There's probably a Honda guy yelling and screaming at me right now. No, you don't need to take that much apart. This way always gives me trouble. That's why I prefer the other method, where you don't even touch that piece, and we're just going to take this guy out. So I'm going to take it out on this side to finish removing this coil over. And now on the other side, I'll show you how to do that without disconnecting the lower control arm. I'm going to remove both of the nuts up top on the coilover. Then I'm going to go straight to that 14mm on the top of the shock fork. Look at that, didn't even need the pry bar. Slid right out. Much easier, didn't even have to mess with getting this thing off. Oh, and actually, by the way, I didn't disconnect this either. So there's one less thing for you to do too. 2 bolts up top, 1 down low. All the weight on the suspension pulls right out the side. Now here's a nice sign for some better quality. Front right, front left. Rears are interchangeable. Why are the Skunk 2s marked and the Yanakas weren't? Because the Skunk 2 ones come with the brake line brackets. Okay, getting the new coilovers in. Got left and right sides. Hook this guy in. Okay, start everything loose. Gonna have to lift this up and start the top nuts. And here's where it could actually get a little more difficult, because now we need to jack this lower control arm up, get pressure on the shock so we can get it all the way on, and you want to tighten these when you're underloaded the suspension. So we're gonna get the jack. Whoop. This is a lot less of a pain if you don't have a cheap strut bar. Whoop. I have a cheap strut bar. Next, you bolt in your brake hose onto the bracket. I'm gonna put this back on. Now for the side we took further apart. I'm gonna slide the coil over in, start the top nuts. support the coilover. This was a little loose out of the box, so we're going to make sure we have this oriented for the brake hose bracket. Tighten it up a little bit. I'll have to fine adjust them later. We'll start the fork. Get the upper control arm put back on. Find the castle nut that I said is very important not to lose. Now we're going to bring the jack in. And this is the fun part of trying to line this fork back up. Now I'm too high. Oop. There we go. Now I just need to take up the slack right here. Boom. A little bit of compression. Now I can tighten the lower bolt. And now the upper one. Now, my front coilovers are in. I just need to attach my brake hose and put my cotter pin back in. Then, of course, make sure everything's tight. Now we're going to slide the rears in. Now for the lower mount, your bolt comes in from the back of the car, so make sure this nut that's welded onto the end of the mount is oriented towards the front of the car. So now we're going to slide this in by kind of hooking it around here so that the fork goes over the control arm. And now we can just lift this right up. Now once your rear coilover is in place, you're going to want to just start the nuts on the top. Then that should give you enough wiggle room here to get your lower bolt in. Like the front, you might need to jack up the control arm a bit. Now you can start the bolt for the lower control arm. Jack this up to get some tension on it. Finish tightening. Then tighten the upper nuts. Alright, so you got your new coilovers installed on all four corners. Double check all your bolts, make sure they're tight. Definitely make sure you double check the lock collars for the adjustment on the coilovers. You want to make sure those are tight. They're not always tightened right from the factory. You got to check them. If everything's all tightened up, it's time to reassemble your interior in the back. Put your wheels back on. Drop her down and see how she looks. Figure out how you want to adjust your coilovers going up or down. And don't forget your little rubber caps. Those dust boots can go a long way, believe it or not. Wow. Those are stiff. Now at the moment, the Skunk 2s are sitting about the same as the Yanakas. Actually, I think they're a little more level. I got a little less fender gap in the front, but I'm tucking tire a bit in the rear. But you know what makes me feel immediately better about the Skunk 2s over the Yanakas? I installed these at the Skunk 2 factory settings. And the car is fairly level. Doesn't look like it's ready for freaking takeoff. So I'm gonna call it a night for tonight. I'm gonna worry about adjusting these things on a different day. It's time to take it for a test drive. Talk to you guys later.